In February 1897, a British naval column marched on a rainforest capital, burned a royal palace to the ground, and flooded the world's museums with masterpieces the kingdom had forged in metal and memory. After 128 years, the story is bending. Masterworks are going home. But why were they taken? Who gets them back? And what happens to the hundreds still held by the most famous museum on earth? This is the Kingdom of Benin, Edo language, southern Nigeria. From at least the 1500s, a royal guild of brass casters forged history into metal. Kings, warriors, ritual scenes, the empire's pulse hammered into brass and bronze. These are the Benin Bronzes, not just plaques, but commemorative heads, figures, royal regalia. The plaques once lined palace courtyards, a metal archive of diplomacy and war, trade with Portuguese merchants, and ceremonies bound to the Oba. More than 900 plaques alone were later found stacked in a palace storeroom. European trade, beginning with the Portuguese, supplied copper alloys called manillas, fueling large-scale casting. The art is Benin's. The metal often arrived by sea. By the late 1800s, Britain wanted control of palm oil, rubber, and ivory. Benin's Oba, Ovonramwen, protected his monopoly. Tensions snapped in January 1897, when a British delegation led by Acting Consul General James Phillips pushed toward Benin despite warnings to delay. An ambush followed. Several British officials and many African porters were killed. Britain answered with a punitive expedition. Roughly 1,200 men under Admiral Harry Rawson. In under 2 weeks, Benin City fell. The palace was torched. Chiefs were hanged. The Obi deposed. Victorian reports described scenes of human sacrifice. Accounts scholars warn were often exaggerated to justify invasion. What is not in doubt, the destruction, the executions, and the mass seizure of royal art. The bronzes were shipped, sold, and scattered to fund the expedition, now in approximately 160 institutions worldwide. Germany, Britain, the US, the Netherlands, Benin's royal art became everyone's and no one's. For decades, Benin's kings and Nigeria's curators called for returns. Then, finally, dominoes. Then came a twist inside Nigeria. A 2023 presidential decree named the Oba of Benin the legal owner and custodian of returned bronzes, sparking debate over whether returns go to the royal palace, federal museums, or both. In February 2025, Nigeria's National Commission for Museums and Monuments and the Oba's court struck a cooperation deal. NCMM will display and conserve. A planned Benin Royal Museum will eventually house many returns. June 2025. The Netherlands formally returns 119 Benin objects, plaques, regal bells, figures to Nigeria. It's the single largest repatriation of Benin works to date. June 2025. The Netherlands formally returns 119 Benin objects, plaques, regal bells, figures to Nigeria. It's the single largest repatriation of Benin works to date. More returns are negotiating. Museums from Boston to Leiden, Berlin to DC are rewriting policies or striking loans that acknowledge the truth of 1897. One collection towers over the debate: the British Museum, with hundreds of Benin works, often quoted as more than 900 associated pieces. But UK law, the British Museum Act 1963, largely forbids deaccession, except for narrow cases, duplicates, unfit objects, certain human tissue or Nazi-era claims. Directors talk of partnerships and loans, not permanent returns. One collection towers over the debate: the British Museum, with hundreds of Benin works, often quoted as more than 900 associated pieces. But UK law, the British Museum Act 1963, largely forbids deaccession, except for narrow cases, duplicates, unfit objects, certain human tissue or Nazi-era claims. Directors talk of partnerships and loans, not permanent returns. In Nigeria, the question isn't if they're Benin's, it's where and how to hold them now: palace, federal museum, or shared custody. The 2025 NCMM OBA Accord sketches a path: conserve and display now, build the Benin Royal Museum, and weave returns into national collections. It's a negotiation within a reunion. Another project, the broader Edo Museum initiatives in Benin City, have evolved over time, but the goal is unchanged: create world-class spaces worthy of world-class art. Synthesis of evolving EMOWAA/Royal Museum plans, drawing on reportage. Avoid hard specs that shift. Art survives the fire that burns its house. These works carried Benin's language of coral and copper across oceans. In Europe, they changed art history. At home, they restore a broken timeline. When a child in Benin City can lean close and see the dimples on a 16th century courtier, that is more than restitution. It is the return of context. 119 came home from the Netherlands in June 2025. More will follow. But the hardest questions remain in London. Questions of law and of what a world museum owes the world. Once, the Bronzes told the story of a kingdom to its people. Now, perhaps, they'll tell it again, from home. If history surprised you today,